A few episodes ago on Project Big Screen, we did a ranked choice vote on who we thought the best directors of the 21st century are. Now, a lot of my picks didn't make the cut, so I decided to go through and talk about my personal list because I love talking about movies. I'll run through my number 25 to number 11 pretty briefly, but then I'll get into more depth with number 10 to 1. Let's start out with number 25, Damien Chazelle. I loved Whiplash and La La Land, and I think that Chazelle just kind of taps into this mixture of music and filmmaking that very few directors can do. And the only reason I have him this low, which I wouldn't even say low because we only have 25 options here, is that I don't love First Man and I really didn't care for Babylon. Although that might be a little bit of an over-exaggeration because Babylon does have one of my favorite scenes of the century where Gene Smart is talking to Brad Pitt. Now my number 24, Steve McQueen. Like Damien Chazelle, he doesn't have a ton of volume, but the movies he has made have been really good. 12 Years a Slave obviously got all the Oscar hardware, but I do think Widows is one of the more slept-on movies of the last 10-ish years. Hunger and Shame are both also great movies, but I would say Blitz was maybe a little bit of a letdown just because he's such a great director and Saoirse Ronan is such a great actress. And number 23, I have Joachim Trier. His filmography seems to only be getting better with every release. He's just really good at making these intimate, powerful movies that feel organic and real, like conversations that you're watching through a window pane, not through a movie screen. And I think the only reason I have him so low, like a lot of these guys, is just the volume's not there yet. At number 22, I have Richard Linklater. There are a lot of people that love Linklater. I wouldn't say that I don't love him, I just am not an acolyte of Linklater. He has a pretty huge filmography this century, and I wouldn't say all of them are bona fide hits, which also kind of hurts his ranking here too. But the hits he has, they are very damn good. At number 21, I have Alejandro Iñárritu. He's a back-to-back Best Director winner at the Oscars, and I do think Birdman is one of the better movies of the 21st century. And I also think The Revenant is kind of underrated now. Did Leonardo DiCaprio get a make good Oscar for that? Sure. Does that mean it's a bad movie? No. What brings Iñárritu down a little bit for me is just Bardo was insufferable. That was a bad movie. At number 20, I have Ruben Östlund. I almost want to bump him higher because the English language remake of Force Majeure, which is an amazing, amazing movie, is so bad. If you ever watched the movie Downhill, it's awful. He's just a master of dramedy. Every movie he's made, I've really, really, really liked. His last two, The Square and Triangle of Sadness, were amazing, and I am there, front row, every movie he makes. At number 19, I have Terrence Malick. This is probably my most Homer pick, I guess, because I just love his movies. But man, just watch The Tree of Life and tell me he is not one of the greatest artists living in this medium. I would absolutely hear complaints about Night of Cups or Song to Song, but The Tree of Life, The New World, Hidden Life, he's an absolute artist. At number 18, I have Yorgos Lanthimos. Is he an Emma Stone merchant? Perhaps, but he has made a handful of very good movies, including The Favorite, which is one of my favorite movies, no pun intended, of the 21st century. And I do give him credit in that he will swing for the fences, and it doesn't always connect, but when he does, it's a home run. At number 17, I have Guillermo del Toro. I probably have him a little bit lower than some people, but I just don't totally care for his franchise stuff. And I do think you need to dock him just a little bit for making the same movie 100 times with not enough variance. But it is hard to argue that there are very few directors capable of hitting the level of artistry that he gets in his movies. Production design, costumes, characters, he just gets you into a different place that other directors just can't seem to do. At number 16, I have Hayao Miyazaki. And honestly, I might have him on the list for the last century as well, because there is nobody on earth that works the animated medium like Miyazaki does. And his perfectionism has given us some of the best and most beautiful animated movies ever made. At number 15, I have Sean Baker. Every movie Sean Baker has made has been over a 90 out of 100 for me. He captures the underbelly of our country in a way that feels so organic. It's almost like you're watching a documentary. And I think part of the reason for the success is him having trust in non-actors or in relative unknowns and putting them into position to succeed. And I do think with a few more movies, he'll be moving up higher on this list. At number 14, I have Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and he is so influential to the generation of filmmakers that came after him. Christopher Nolan being the prime example. He is also, over the last century, a volume shooter. But when he hits, you get some incredible, incredible movies. But the stinkers do bring him out of my top 10. At number 13, I have Steven Soderbergh. I don't feel like Soderbergh gets nearly enough credit for his work. I feel like everyone loves his big traditional heavy hitters like Ocean's 11, but he also has some insane, experimental, strange work and just refuses to be nailed down into one type of genre or movie. He'll make a very good traditional heist movie like Logan Lucky and follow it up with a psychological mindfuck shot entirely on an iPhone like Unsane. And his last three movies have all been certified bangers that I would recommend to anybody. However, when you are as experimental as he is, you do get some stinkers, which brings it down a little bit. My number 12 is Alfonso Cuarón. Every time I think about him, I get mad that he hasn't made more movies. But every movie he has made has been exceptional. He made two of the best foreign language movies ever made, arguably the best Harry Potter movie, an incredible thriller in Gravity, and one of my all-time favorite movies, Children of Men. At number 11, I have Park Chan-wook. I think a good gauge of a director's work is how much he influences others. And a lot of your favorite directors love Park Chan-wook, and a lot of other directors have tried to imitate his style. He has a couple movies I don't love, but Oldboy is absolutely iconic. JSA is one of the best Korean movies ever made, and his last three movies have all been phenomenal. All right, now for the top 10, starting with Steven Spielberg. To me, with Spielberg, it always comes down to he has a very unique sense of wonder. There's nobody that's able to put to screen that sense of adventure like him. And when he applies some of these techniques to something more dramatic like music, Munich or Lincoln, you don't lose fidelity, which I think is very impressive. I would say his 2000s have obviously not been as prolific as everything before that, but he still has really good movies here. I'd count Catch Me If You Can among his best work. Munich is criminally underrated. West Side Story was a fantastic remake, and The Fabelmans was an amazing personal story, but he also has plenty of misses during this period. Tintin, Warhorse, the BFG, The Post, just stuff that's not up to his usual standard, but he is still one of the greatest to ever do it. At number 9, I have David Fincher. Fincher to me is pretty interesting because his filmography up to Gone Girl is pretty untouchable. I think he established himself as the sort of king of thrillers. Panic Room is severely underappreciated. Zodiac is arguably the best true crime movie ever made. He has The Social Network, which some people consider the best biopic of all time, another great thriller with Dragon Tattoo, and then another great thriller with Gone Girl. But I didn't love Benjamin Button, and I feel like he's kind of been coasting since his Netflix deal. I wasn't a big fan of his passion project in Mank, although I liked that he was able to make it, and I wasn't a huge fan of The Killer either. This collaboration has produced some good TV too, like Mindhunter, but I want to see him making great movies again. So again, a very good catalog, but it just kind of brought down by the inactivity. At number 8, I have Martin McDonough. McDonough is one of my favorite working directors because not only can he direct the absolute shit out of a movie, but he can write it too. His scripts are laser sharp, they are funny, they're witty, and he always gets like an A+ performance out of every actor he uses. I think In Bruges is one of the best dark comedies ever made. Seven Psychopaths is absolutely hysterical, and Banshees of Inisherin was the funniest comedy of the year for the first half of the movie, and then the best drama of the year for the second half of the movie. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri might be his like worst movie, but it could easily be another director's best. And it's ironically the only movie of his that has Oscar hardware. At number 7, I have Martin Scorsese. Scorsese is one of the great storytellers in cinematic history. Even in the movies that he's made that I don't care for, he always does a phenomenal job at telling the story. He has a handful of movies from this century that I would consider fantastic. The Departed, Silence, The Irishman, and Killers of the Flower Moon. And there's a handful that I would consider very solid in Gangs of New York, Wolf of Wall Street, and Shutter Island. But then there's also some I would consider, maybe bad's the wrong word, but just ones I don't love in The Aviator and Hugo. So again, really, really good century, but he doesn't have that like Goodfellas to take him up to the top. At number 6, I have Bong Joon Ho. When Bong won the Oscar for Best Director, one of the first people he thanked was Martin Scorsese. And I think you see Scorsese's storytelling DNA in a lot of the stuff that Bong does. But what I think is a huge strength of Bong specifically is that he makes sure every frame of his movie has a very, very, very particular intent and purpose. Angles, blocking, whatever, everything has purpose. I think it all comes together the best in Parasite, but I would also highly recommend Memories of Murder or Mother. But also, don't sleep on Okja. Okja, very underappreciated. Before we get into the top 5, I would say that all of them have kind of similar traits. I would say all 5 of these are pretty tactile filmmakers, which is to say that they make movies that feel like you can reach out and touch them, which isn't to say I don't like CGI. I love CGI movies too, but these ones I just appreciate a little bit more. I would also say that most of these directors tread on the darker side of things thematically, but they're also really good at comedy too. And most of all, they all make interesting movies. Not always original, but just interesting ideas and interpretations. So number 5, I have Paul Thomas Anderson. There are a few things that I really love about PTA, and the first being, he just knows his way around a camera. He does these amazing long takes, and I think he's able to shoot these like very tight, intimate shots, as well as he does the big giant scale ones. He's also just really good at character-driven work, and he reminds me a lot of Martin McDonough in that he writes them in a way that you feel what they're feeling without having to explicitly say stuff out loud. And the big difference for me between PTA and McDonough is just like McDonough doesn't have the same volume of work. But There Will Be Blood is one of the best movies of the century, and he doesn't have a bad movie over the last 26 years. At number 4, I have Quentin Tarantino. Unlike PTA, I do think that Tarantino has a bad movie under his belt in Death Proof, but it really doesn't matter. Kill Bill, Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, all phenomenal. Like PTA, he is also an incredible writer that is so good at dialogue and so good at getting like his exact vision of how a scene should go on screen with a great performance out of the actors he picks. I think the like worst thing you could say about him is that a lot of his style is like homages to other great movies throughout history, but like he maxes it all out. And if that was easy, all these other directors would be doing it too and succeeding, and they're not. At number 3, I have Denis Villeneuve. I love Denis Villeneuve's movies, and when you look at his filmography, he does not have a miss. And when you've been working as long as he has without one, I think it's super impressive. One of the many things I really like about him is that he has this very intuitive grasp on sci-fi. He just delivers on lore and scale and drama and action in a way a lot of other directors in the same genre can't seem to do, specifically in this tactile way. And he also feels very comfortable letting you sit in the ambiance of a scene without saying something, without action happening, which I think really gets you immersed into a setting. And even outside of sci-fi, Sicario, Prisoners, Polytechnique, Incendies, all great. And what gets him up really high for me is just, again, the fact that he has not made a bad movie. Number 2 for me is the Coen Brothers. I love the Coen Brothers and think they are absolutely brilliant. They're not only great directors, they are, I think, exceptional writers and really judicious editors. They directed my personal number 1 movie of all time in No Country for Old Men, and I think the rest of the catalog this century is pretty strong as well. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, The Man Who Wasn't There, Burn After Reading, A Serious Man, True Grit, Inside Llewyn Davis, all phenomenal movies. And I wouldn't say I love all of their movies during this period, but I appreciate their willingness to swing for the fences. And where a lot of directors feel safe in just making movies where there's an existing audience or they know they can succeed, I think the Coens just make whatever they find interesting and either hoping that an audience finds its way there or they create a new one. And like a lot of these directors, they always seem to get the best career work out of whoever they cast. And at number 1, I have Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan, to me and to many others, is the director of the century. He's a complete unicorn in that every movie he makes is beloved by critics, is beloved by audiences, and they always make money. And that's not something you could say about any other director on this list, especially one with this many movies under their belt. What I love about Nolan is his ability to take a complex idea and make it digestible. Because movies like Interstellar or Inception or Tenet should, by rights, be hard to explain, and the other directors I feel like would have a penchant to either over-explain or under-explain. And Nolan has just always been really good at towing that line. And I think this naturally leads to film snobs accusing him of exposition dumping, while people that see one movie a year proclaim him as the smartest filmmaker that's ever lived. Neither of those is true in my opinion. What he is a master at, in my opinion, is taking interesting ideas and complex characters and sort of presenting them in the best way to the widest audience. And I also think he is just a genius at ending movies. There is no movie of his that doesn't have an absolutely perfect looped around ending. And let me just do a quick Nolan tiering of his 21st century movies. Let's put them into S, A, B, and C tier. His C tier would be movies that I would say are roughly around the 100th to 200th best movies of the century. And there I would have The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, Tenet, Insomnia, and Dunkirk. My B tier I'd say is movies around the top 100 of the century. In this B tier I would have Interstellar, Memento, and Inception. A tier I would say are top 50 movies of the century. I would have The Odyssey, The Prestige, and The Dark Knight. And then S tier, which I would say are the top 10 movies of the century, I would have Oppenheimer. So that's my top 25, but let's go through some honorable mentions really quick. Peter Jackson probably deserves a spot on this list. He made the best trilogy of all time in The Lord of the Rings, and he has the money and the accolades to all back it up. I just didn't value franchise work that highly, and I'm not a huge King Kong guy, and I did not like the Hobbit trilogy. However, his documentaries, out of this world. I think Jordan Peele deserves a lot of credit for revolutionizing horror because I think this sort of like 10-year period before he comes around, horror movies were terrible, like truly low effort, bad movies. And he makes Get Out, and all of a sudden that's all everybody wants. We want unique, original horror ideas. But he only has 2 movies after that, and I don't really like them as much as Get Out. Still good movies, not as much as Get Out. Adam McKay, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I just didn't value comedy or horror or franchise work nearly as highly as some other genres. If that's unfair, that's fine. That's just, again, my personal list. However, The Big Short, phenomenal movie. I do think Taika Waititi did some damage to his brand after Thor: Love and Thunder because the movies he made before that were mostly great. And with Wes Anderson, he's just like a you love him or you hate him guy. I don't care for Wes Anderson. Like, I don't think you could deny his artistry at all. And I would say that Fantastic Mr. Fox would probably be either number 1 or close to one of the best non-live action movies of the century. But he just curates to a taste that I don't love. And I think his last few movies have not really had a lot of differentiation to me. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but that's just my feel. Chloe Zhao is also fantastic, but I think she needs more movies under her belt before I can put her here. Eggers is kind of the same thing. I do think he's a great artist. I just need to see more movies before I can put him in here. And again, the horror thing kind of screws with it a little bit. And I think Ari Aster I'd put in sort of the same camp as Jordan Peele, where he's doing phenomenal stuff within the genre. It's just I don't value that genre as highly. Barry Jenkins, it's also a volume thing because I do think If Beale Street Could Talk, I think is a beautiful movie. Same thing with Moonlight. It's just you need more movies under your belt, and Mufasa just doesn't do it for me. With David Lynch, I think if you go back one more decade, the answer changes, but with this, you just get Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, and that's just not enough. Catherine Bigelow, I think, is one of the best female working directors. Hurt Locker, obviously fantastic, and Zero Dark 30 amazing as well, but House of Dynamite, that did a lot of damage to me. That did a lot of damage. And with Coogler, it's again, the horror in the franchise work doesn't move me a ton, but they're all great movies. He's never made a bad movie, and Fruitvale Station, obviously incredible. And I do think that Coogler, like once Black Panther 3 is done filming and he gets into more original stuff, he's gonna be on this list. But anyway, that's my list. If I forgot someone, if you wanna make fun of me, you know where to do it, all down below.